We're talking about emotional regulation and how it affects kids and families and what the heck to do about it. We're specifically talking about emotional dysregulation in kids with ADHD whose brains are neurodivergent. They're wired a little differently. And sometimes they feel things more strongly. And I want to have a good conversation to be supportive. And we're going to dive into, what is emotional regulation, what the heck to do about it, right? Because it's great to have understanding, but you need practical strategies and you need to also implement those strategies. Do what Dr. Roseann says. If you're new to me and you want to jump in our group, you can go to our free Facebook group, drroseann.com/group. This is for parents that are holistically minded. They want to learn more about natural solutions that support the brain and behavior. And not that you can't be on medication, but you're really looking for ways to really create lifelong change for your kids. So I love that tribe. So let's just go back and listen to the whole series about self-regulation and emotional dysregulation. This is such an important topic. And it doesn't matter if you have a child with ADHD, you have a child with disruptive mood disorder, OCD. Dysregulation is dysregulation. And, you can have an understimulated brain, overstimulated brain. We're going to talk about it. But what is emotional dysregulation? So it's when when your kid feels things really strongly and has reactive emotions to either a real or a perceived issue, threat, stimulation, and you have these big emotional reactions, right? And this isn't just about kids, people. This is about adults. We all know people like this, right? I have a family member like this that I just have learned that I can only talk and text to them. I still get emotional dysregulation responses from them. So what's that connection between ADHD or any disorder that affects the brain, and more specifically impulse control, right? So when we have ADHD, right, what are the core features, right? So everyone struggles with paying attention, shifting gears. Executive functioning is never going to be what it should be, right? Or you can learn those skills, but you're not going to start off with that ability to future think, see that end result, and work towards it. That's really what executive functioning is. It's that job manager. It says, like today, left home without, I carry a written book wherever I go, a book that I can write in. And it was because I was off routine today. I'm actually super organized and I probably didn't put it back. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I need my book. Where am I going to take my notes? I don't want to have a bunch of stickies next to me. And my brain thinks in the future all the time. And I organize my thinking based on that. And actually my little written book, unlike, the notes section on my phone, is really about planning for me. I do a lot of planning and I also do I love to write ideas in there. And that's how my brain structures and works. But why do kids with ADHD, why do they really struggle with emotional dysregulation, right? More, right? So there is a subset, about 70% of kids have emotional regulation issues and they have rejection sensitive dysphoria disorder. And that means that it's not a recognized condition yet, but it really is that highly emotional individual with ADHD. And it's all about impulse control. They struggle with an impulse control. I talk about this a lot. We think about kids that are handsy or, touch things all the time. I was just on an intake this morning and they're like, impulse control is the problem, Dr. Rowe. And so the dad was walking around doing their best, doing a wonderful job. These are wonderful parents and saying, don't do this, don't do that. And, we were really trying to hone in what were those contributors, right? What was contributing to some of these impulsive behaviors, anxiety, sensory processing, and also actually not knowing what to do, right? But there is a deep connection between emotional dysregulation and ADHD. And at its root is that lack of impulse control. And anxiety is a big part of it. Most of our neurodivergents, have a lot of anxiety. And we don't think of anxiety for somebody who might be impulsive, right? But we certainly think about it when somebody says, shows worry. Maybe they have stomach aches or they are saying, I'm worried about something, which doesn't often happen with kids or even individuals. That's something that's learned language about feelings, right? So some of these emotional reactions happen because kids don't have language. They don't have strategies. And I know most parents think they use a lot of emotional language at home. I'm promising you, you don't, because families are really stressed. So we tend to use the same words like stress, upset. But what is that range of emotions, right? And how do we get kids to use those words? The big part of that is actually to demonstrate, talk out loud, show them ways to manage frustration. It's not an overnight process. And one therapy session a week isn't going to do it. Recently, I was working with somebody and they were just insistent on the magic wand, right? Which I don't know why they came to me, because we all know I don't believe in the magic wand. But, is there a setting in the neurofeedback that's going to make it work faster? No. I want him to have therapy and nobody else. No, that's not how it's going to work, because as parents, we're there to guide and craft, right? And that's why we have these conversations. It's all possible, but it's not lightning. There's no magic bullet. It takes time for it to unfold. And then the magic's in the micro. That's where it is. And we as parents have a lot of powers to do that. So what happens in the brain, right? You're going to always hear me talk about under and overstimulation of the brain. And this is a big part of why dysregulation happens and actually why the brain gets stuck in that state, right? So we can see those understimulated behaviors, problems with focus, lack of motivation. One of the biggest complaints parents talk about, which I just did an episode that will be released on motivation, because we all need to support our kids with motivation. And then those overstimulated behaviors, impulsivity, anger, irritation, huge emotional reactions where you're like, what did that just come from? Why did that happen? And really our brain, we have wiring, but we also have so many ways that we can affect it, which is why we do these conversations. So let's talk about strategies for emotional regulation, and really practical tips for daily life, right? Because we as parents, we need to know what to do, right? So this is me always sharing this information, and these are emotional dysregulation is one of the top reasons why people come to me. Forget about the name of the clinical issue. Yeah, it's great to know, right? But it is happening a lot, and boy, is it happening a lot more to kids and within families. And when you have a very emotionally reactive child, it is hard. It is hard for that child. It is hard for you as a parent, and it's hard for you as a parent to not get triggered, which is why I'm doing so much work about self-regulation, right? So what are our strategies for managing that emotional dysregulation? Number one, your own oxygen mask. I can't tell you how critical that is. In the same situation where this child was so reactive, I don't, the parent is so dysregulated, so upset. Of course they are, but not reeling it in, right? Our kids trigger us for a lot of reasons. I'm going to be talking so much more about that, because it's important for you to regulate yourself. And getting your own nervous system to regulate is honestly, I feel, the hardest part. And I consistently see in our one-to-one clients that is the absolute biggest hurdle. And parents will say, that's not me. That's not me. It is. I promise you. Even Dr. Rowe gets triggered. I mean, it just happens, right? So what are things we can do? Don't argue or fact fight. When you are with somebody who's dysregulated, those frontal lobes are off. We move into a primitive state of survival when you're reactive and you're in a sympathetic dominant state. Arguing with a dysregulated person is the worst thing you can do. And this is where I see parents fact fight. Well, I told you to do this, and I know I did. And and so you're meeting each other with such irritation and anger. And you're also trying to argue with somebody who literally cannot hear you because they're in a sympathetic dominant state. You move further in, and you're imperfect and you should be 80% imperfect. And this is never going to not happen. Like, this will happen at times. If this is your go-to response, you got yourself a problem and you need therapeutic help, right? This is a super hard thing to not do when you have a highly conflictual relationship, right? But here are some things that can help. Number one, don't personalize that behavior, right? Everyone thinks, your kid's out to get you. You're doing this on purpose. Why do they keep falling back on this behavior? Is this a flare or is this their real behavior? I mean, these are questions and things that again, when people work one-on-one with me, just the constant, right? So we're having this conversation so you can understand this is what most parents are facing. And kids, when you don't personalize that behavior, like, wow, this is part of their neurodivergence. Like, he's super sensory. He's, acting like it's the end of the world from his socks. Why do you got to personalize that behavior? That's a real emotion. They feel things so strongly, right? And when we start to understand and not react, that is a huge positive shift point. That road is hard. And if you don't have that oxygen mask on and getting your stuff together, you're not going to make it. You're going to be looking for solution. You're going to be doing sprinkle therapy, and you're not going to get the results that you want, right? So much of what I have to do, 80% of the time in the first 3 months of our program, is actually walking parents through that road. Really, truly. And again, great human beings. And it's just so easy to get into that state, especially when you have a kid. You don't know how to parent. We don't know how to parent in general. And then we have a reactive kid. Okay. The other big mistake parents make is they assume their child knows what to do, right? Perfect example is like your kid's been in school, all day. Let's say they're 10 or they're 15. It doesn't matter. And you're faced with doing your homework, right? So we're like, sit down and do your homework, right? Well, you assume they know all the steps to it, but why, right? If we have issues of attention, we have issues of anxiety, those things will interfere with learning at every step, right? Whether it's in the classroom, whether it's social, there's going to be some impact, maybe in one area, maybe in every area, right? But when we assume they don't know what to do, we react differently. We don't feel as reactive, right? And simple questioning like, okay, so you've got your math test, right? What is it on? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about how you know about that information, right? You just start making it logical. This is how I talk to my kids. I'm not saying it's 100%. Sometimes, I got an FU last night from Max, but he came back and apologized. So it was something totally different. It was the WWE Brother SmackDown situation. So I share these things with you because I'm not a perfect parent. My kids aren't perfect kids. I don't want perfect kids. Like, I don't want kids that are followers. I want kids that are thinkers. And that means there's going to always be challenges, right? But they'll be better human beings. So don't assume they know what to do, whether it's making that bed, taking that garbage out, whatever it is, because these are the daily things that cause full on friction at home, right? Now, we always want to think about things from a problem solving perspective. How do we foster these coping skills, right? Because again, if we assume our kids know what to do, we assume that they know how to get to the solution, right? And if the solution isn't what they want, do they know how to regulate? So I have lots to say on this. We have other episodes, but ultimately, you are the role model. Again, why you need your oxygen mask on. Get your stuff together. Knock off the triggers. Go to see a therapist. Join my challenge, right? And when you are more regulated, right, you can be the role model. And And it's every day. It's all the little ways, all those metacognitive things, the things that we do in our head to solve problems for kids who are dysregulated, for kids who learn differently. We wanna bring them out, right? Like, "Oh, uh, I forgot to get toilet paper at the grocery store." True story. And so, okay, when can I get that order in? Like, that's how I do this. And then the next thing I know, my kids are like, "Well, mom, I think you're gonna da, 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 da." You can ask dad. You can make an order. We can swing by after school. They start thinking, and when kids are good at problem solving, they realize there are problems. I can come up with solutions. I can test them out. I can fail. I can be successful, and I can feel good about myself, right? We're always so afraid at the failure. And these steps, as Tony always says, are easy with the mouth. This is what real parenting's about. And you're already working really hard. You have to shift what you're doing so you don't get caught up in this reactive back and forth. Somebody says, thanks, Dr. Rowe, for sharing. I'm always happy to share, right? Um, and you have to really start changing all those little pieces, not get overwhelmed. I say pick one thing, do it for 30 days, be consistent. This is about learning. Don't think you're going to do this for 1 week and your kid's going to all of a sudden be regulated. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight. I say that all the time, but I want parents to be empowered. And these are the steps that when parents consistently do it, we really see a reduction in reactivity. And, just a really truly know your kid's not doing this on purpose and their system is moving to a state of dysregulation more often than anything because they don't have those skills. They don't know what to do. And they're caught in this sort of reactive behavior. And, you're probably meeting your kid with some irritation and anger. If it's your go-to response, that has to be addressed immediately. And there are lots of ways to get support. If you're looking for the right solution for you, you can go to drroseann.com/help. Fill out the solution matcher. We have lots of things from books to courses to one-on-one program, and we'll guide you to where you're at right now. So, I always try to leave things with a positive note. You got this. You can do this. This is why I do this, so that you have the tools to be empowered. We are not talking enough about parent empowerment and the solutions, but we are right here. So share this with another mother who needs some help and get started today.